Hello everybody, good evening. Welcome to Pathlight Thrive Hive, if indeed that's where you're watching this from. That's my Facebook group, it's very lovely. And what's this saying here? No, I don't want to do that, thank you. Yeah, and hello if you're watching on YouTube or anywhere else as well. So I am Paul, my name is Paul Wolstenholme. I am the director of Pathlight Limited, which is a small company that offers mental health first aid training, workplace wellbeing programs, coaching, and all sorts of lovely stuff like that. So you can have a check out of what we offer on pathlight.org.uk. And I also set up this group, Pathlight Thrive Hive, on Facebook over a year ago now, at the start of the pandemic, to support people, offer support, connection, and inspiration around mental health and holistic well-being and navigating life's challenges, not least this pandemic that we are in the middle of. Are we in the middle of it? I don't know. I was having a chat with a friend of mine last week, and she gave me a new perspective on this pandemic and how long it's been going on. So if you are 50 years old now, you've been in this pandemic for a year, so that's 2% of your life. 2% of your life where you've not been able to do all the things that you want to do and have the freedoms that you might have taken for granted previously. So that's a healthy chunk, isn't it? Or unhealthy, perhaps. Although I do admit that there's a lot of positive things that have come out of this pandemic for many people, myself included. Yeah, but if you're 10 years old, you spent 10% of your life in some form of lockdown or restrictions. So, gosh, think about that. It's a massive thing that we are experiencing at the moment. So I hope you're doing okay. Hello, Kim. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. Tonight we're talking about, I am talking about our addiction to the false self. And it's very informal. This is just something that I've been thinking about over the past few days. I've had a couple of chats with friends around this topic, and I've listened to a couple of podcasts, and I've been doing some reading and reflecting on my own experience, and some of my client work as well has touched on this topic. So I thought it was quite, I'm just going to adjust the camera there, I thought it was quite pertinent right now to speak about the false self and how that connects with addiction. Because it's perhaps an addiction that many of us don't realise that we have. So yeah, just some reflections, and do feel free to comment or add questions as we go through. This is quite unusual actually, because normally my talks here are, I'm facilitating a space for somebody else to share their story. So it's tonight's a bit different. I'm just talking. I'll share some of my story as well, but do get involved, ask questions or comments. And hello, Jenny, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, just a bit of a caveat to start with. This is, like I say, it's very informal, and most of this is not my knowledge. I'm a bit of a knowledge magpie. I like to just read books, listen to podcasts, and study and get knowledge from here, there, and everywhere. And perhaps none of this is new. I may be putting a slightly different slant on it, and as I say, sharing some of my own experiences. But yeah, it's been inspired by people like Carl Jung, who I study at college, Tara Brach, who is a meditation teacher, a Buddhist leader, and also a psychotherapist, and various, as I say, books, podcasts, and some of my client work and such like. So I think it would be useful, first of all, just to define what an addiction is. And people might have different ideas of what an addiction is, but one of my go-to people in this topic is Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, who is, I suppose he's an addiction and trauma specialist. And he says that how he defines addiction is as follows. I've written it down, so I'm just going to read it out. An addiction manifests in any behaviour that a person finds temporary pleasure or relief in, and therefore craves, but suffers negative consequences from and has trouble giving up. So there's those different facets to an addiction. It can be any behaviour. It isn't just drugs, alcohol, that type of stuff. It's any behaviour that someone gets that temporary pleasure from or temporary relief in, and they crave it, but there are negative consequences. They do it anyway because they have trouble giving up, hence the addiction. So there's a bit of a cycle that Gabor Mate talks about around addictions. So first of all, there's the denial phase of I'm not going to afford myself this thing, perhaps because I know it has these negative consequences. But then we have the craving for it, whether that's mental or physiological. And then when we have the thing or do the thing that we're addicted to, we get that temporary relief, but then comes the fallout. So it's that cycle, and it just goes round and round and round. And the other thing Gabor Mate says is that an addiction is an attempt to solve a life problem. So very often people are criticised, castigated for being an addict. It's seen as a kind of moral shortcoming, but actually it's an attempt to solve a problem in their life. And only secondarily does it begin to act like a disease. And the other thing Gabor Mate says is that every addict has been a traumatized child. So not every traumatized child will become an addict, but every addict has suffered some kind of trauma as a child. So from that, he believes that all of us fit on the addiction spectrum somewhere. And some behaviours we might not class as addictions. So I suppose the obvious ones, as I mentioned, is alcohol, drugs, tobacco. Those are all drugs, actually, aren't they? All of those things. But there's also other things like workaholism, gaming, gambling, sex addiction, porn addiction. Some people might say eating disorders are a form of addiction as well. Sugar is incredibly addictive. This is something I'm trying to kick. Maybe next month, after I've got through the Easter eggs, I'm going to attempt to go a month without processed sugar, because I know it's bad, but it's good. It's good, but it's bad. And I am addicted to sugar. Shopping is another thing people can get addicted to. Risk taking and the internet, things like Facebook that you're probably watching this on at the moment is designed to be addictive. It's designed to draw you in and keep scrolling, and that's how they make their money, by keeping you there and getting you hooked in with adverts and sending you off down rabbit holes, which I've fallen down myself, YouTube rabbit holes and such like. So yeah, dopamine is the chemical which, is it a chemical? It's a hormone, I think, that the brain releases when we get that hit of, oh yes, somebody's liked my thing on Facebook. And it's that reward center. It's a feel-good hormone. And we get some endorphins as well sometimes due to these addictive behaviors, whether it's internet or gambling or drugs or whatever it is. So yeah, it plays into our brain's hormones and chemicals. It alters our balance, and we can get addicted to those hormones as well, that rush that people get. I know people who are addicted to running. I'm a runner myself, and I know the endorphin rush. It feels really good after you've been for a run, and some people can get addicted to that, and perhaps the negative consequences are they get injured, or they spend too much of their life doing that at the expense of other things, like talking to their partner, for example. So those are all the kind of more obvious forms of addiction. But the one that I want to really focus on this evening is about the masks we wear, the false self. So what do I mean by that? It's not showing who we truly are, hiding our true selves away. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. So first of all, I just want to say a little bit about why do we have addictions? What makes us addicted to something, whether it is a substance or a behaviour or wearing these masks? So there's various different models that attempt to explain why we get addicted to stuff. So the first one is the disease model. So this is a kind of a medical illness where the person is deemed to be powerless over whatever the substance or behavior is. And this is the model that Alcoholics Anonymous use. I think one of the 12-step program, and Narcotics Anonymous as well. One of the steps is about acknowledging that we are powerless over our addiction. So it's kind of putting it out there, outside the body, and saying this is a disease, this is a medical illness, and it's not my fault. So that's one model. Another model is called the Psychodynamic Model, which Sigmund Freud talked about. And for him, it was an unconscious response to coping with difficulties in childhood. So that might be traumas, as Gabor Mate talks about. And because we've suffered those traumas, we attempt to heal them or cope with them, I suppose, in an unconscious way, and it manifests in these addictions. So that's the psychodynamic model. The next one is the social learning model, and this suggests that addiction is a learnt behaviour. So it's something that happens because something is pleasurable. We're consciously accepting those negative consequences, like the hangover that you get from being addicted to alcohol and all the physical problems that come along with it. We see that as being worthwhile, as a payoff against the pleasure that we get from it. So it's just a kind of, yeah, okay, it's a learnt behaviour, I'm going to do this anyway, even though I know it will have negative consequences. And then similar to that is the Socio-Cultural Model, and this talks about the role of the environments that we find ourselves in, playing into those addictions. So it might be that we're surrounded by people who have similar addictions, or normalise that behaviour of drinking or smoking or taking drugs. And very often, if we're in deprived, we live in a deprived area, or we're struggling ourselves financially, we might find ourselves being influenced by our peers in that way, those people around us. And then the final one I want to talk about is the public health model, which is a more kind of integrative model, which brings together all of the above, really. So the addictive nature of the substance is part of it. Also the characteristics of the individual. So whether they've suffered trauma, or they're more prone to get addicted to things. Maybe it's to do with willpower, maybe it's to do with the environment as well. So all of that stuff can play in, and I like that, because to me, there's never one answer to anything. There's never one cause. It's always a combination of different things. That's why I'm studying an integrative form of psychotherapy at the moment, because it says there isn't just one truth. There's wisdom in all of the different schools of psychotherapy. So I like that. So yeah, that's reality. I think it's a combination of all of those things, and basically when someone is in discomfort, whether that's due to their past traumas, their current circumstances, they're not on their path, they're unfulfilled, whatever it is, their unconscious is screaming to be heard, maybe. It's an attempt to either numb or distract or deal or cope with that discomfort. And we've probably all been there. I imagine that many of us have at some point in our lives felt uncomfortable with who we are or what's going on around us. And again, the pandemic's a really good example of that, where people have felt a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, and maybe from that, an addiction may have developed, whether it is drinking or gaming or whatever it is. Yes, so what do I want to say now? I'm going to skip that bit about the internet because it's not really relevant. So, as I said earlier, I'm a mental health first aid teacher, instructor. And on those courses, we talk about dual diagnosis, which is what it's a name for classifying people who have a mental health issue, and they also have a substance abuse issue as well. So it could be someone with depression who's addicted to alcohol, or it could be someone who is bipolar who is also addicted to drugs. And this group of people are very vulnerable, not least because of having a mental health issue is difficult in itself, but also the addiction as well, which is difficult to manage. But the other thing is that the support for these people is it's not an ideal situation in the UK, certainly at the moment, because these people can fall between two stools. There's the mental health support and there's the substance abuse support, and quite often these people get passed from pillar to post. So if they go to the mental health support, they'll say, well, you've got an addiction problem, so that's probably playing into your mental health issue. You need to go and get your addiction sorted and then come back to us and we'll talk about counselling and all that type of stuff. Whereas if they go to the substance abuse support people, they will say, well, you've clearly got a mental health issue and that's why you're addicted to this thing. So you need to go and get your mental health sorted first of all. So they get passed from pillar to post, they get a very bad experience of these support services, and it becomes a vicious cycle very often. So ideally, we'd have a joined up system where someone can walk into a place and just have all of their issues addressed in a one-stop shop. So maybe we'll get there one day. So let's talk about masks then, personas, the false self, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, as I say, I've been thinking about this a lot because this is part of my journey, and maybe yours as well. Do feel free to share if you want to talk about any of your experience, or just share anything, ask any questions as we go through this. So it's about how we behave, how we present ourselves to other people. And the term authenticity is bandied about a lot at the moment. It seems like a real buzzword, and it perhaps is losing some of its real power. But for me, it's about being true to who you really are and showing who you really are in your behaviours, in your speech, in the things that you do. So embracing your whole self and showing that to the world. And it's easier said than done. Because we are social creatures and we need to feel accepted, we need to feel loved, we want to be liked, we want to be part of communities, we want to be part of a tribe. And this goes back millennia to early humans, where we lived in tribes and we needed to behave in certain ways, otherwise we would be shunned from the tribe, and without the protection of the group we would die. If we were banished into the wilderness, that was basically a death sentence. So it's wired into us that we need that acceptance, we need to be liked, and because of that we very often adapt our behaviours to fit in. And I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing, but it's a fact of life for most of us, I would suggest. So we often hide parts of ourselves away that our family, our friends, our employer, or society in general might deem unacceptable. And we might deny parts of ourselves that we're ashamed of personally as well. Maybe parts of ourselves that we're scared of. And this can include our positive characteristics. So this is what Carl Jung calls our shadow. So the bits that we don't really acknowledge, we don't really show to the world, we might not be fully conscious of them ourselves. And it can include things like our talents, our potential, which we haven't manifested yet, as well as the things that we are ashamed of, and the things that we want to hide, or the things we feel are not acceptable in normal society, whatever that is. So that can be quite limiting if we don't embrace and access our shadow, because we're not really we're not being who we truly are. And again, this is a learnt behaviour. So if you think about infants, I'm sure many of you will have spent some time with infants, and at that stage they are just pure beings. They are truly themselves. They don't have masks. We're not born with a mask on. We just, as infants, express our needs exactly what they are. We might not be able to vocalize them in full sentences. We might just cry when we're unhappy or we're hungry or we're hot or cold or whatever. We express our needs. And as we get a bit older, we start to, have tantrums and stamping our feet and stuff. But, by the time we reach age 3, 4, 5, 6, we learn that we have to adapt our behaviors in order to please our parents or our caregivers and just to get along, really. Avoid punishment and get rewards. So we learn that by being good and not causing a fuss, we will get chocolate, we won't get shouted at, we will be praised, we will get affection. So it isn't really unconditional love that we're getting, it's conditional love. And again, this is not everyone will have had this experience, but it is very common. So parts of ourselves are hidden away, and it's a defense mechanism, really, to make sure we're fitting in, we're getting some of our needs met, and we're getting accepted by the people around us. So that can be really useful in early life, but if we carry on with those adapted behaviours in order to fit in adult life, that can actually lead to some problems because, again, we're not being our true selves. And those kind of adaptations can manifest in different ways to get that attention, to get our needs met, and to feel accepted. So one way is people pleasing. I know many people pleasers, and in certain ways I've been there myself. So this is about denying our own needs in order to please others and get that acceptance and love from others. Excuse me. So where am I? People pleasing. Yeah, so we can become a bit of a martyr. We can get trampled on. We can get taken advantage of. It may feed into low self-esteem, low confidence, and it leads to other people not really respecting us very often, and also not really getting to know who we really are because we're hiding parts of ourselves away. We feel that they're not acceptable. So I saw something on Facebook a couple of weeks ago where somebody said that people-pleasing is an unconscious attempt to control how others see us. And I thought, yeah, it is. It's a form of manipulation, actually, to bow to others and try and keep them sweet. So that's an interesting angle on that. So yeah, we're seeking approval for a false self there. It isn't our true self. And it's conditional approval again. It doesn't serve us in the long term, I should say. Another mask that we might put on is one of being the entertainer, being the life and soul of the party. And I went for a walk with a friend of mine, Jack, who's also a member of this group. I had a really good chat, and we did talk about this, that some people go through life as the life and soul of the party, the entertainer. They crave that attention. They're, first in the bar, last out of the bar, always got an amusing anecdote, but it isn't really their true selves. It's a show that they're putting on. It's a mask, just a different flavour of mask, I suppose. And doing that can be really exhausting and inauthentic. And very much the tears of the clown come to mind, because it can be quite a hollow place to be, quite a lonely place to be, that, once the show's over, you go home, you're on your own, you think, yeah, I didn't really show my true self there. And similarly with the people pleasing, people don't get to know you. And this has been my journey really with the people pleasing and not showing who I really am. And there's been a lot of growth for me over the past 10 years as I've got to know who I am and accept more of who I am, and then starting to show that to the world. And this Facebook group has been a big part of that, actually, of showing my vulnerability, opening up about my mental health issues and some self-harming and stuff I've done in the past, and just really being vulnerable, being authentic, showing that. And in order to do that, I had to let go of shame, and that was part of the process for me. Yeah, what else can we do? Yeah, so people who are very competitive or perfectionistic as well, these are also signs that you might be wearing a mask and you're not really accepting who you are and showing all of who you are. So the message in general is one of deficiency or fearfulness or both. So it's a feeling that you're not enough. There's something deficient, something not enough about you. You're not good enough. You don't belong in that group. You're not good enough. So you've got to either hide away because you're not good enough, or you've got to put on a big show to tell people, yes, I am good enough. Here you are. Look, I'm funny. Or the fear, the fear of, oh, will I be accepted if I say this thing that's really on my mind? Someone's stepped over my boundary. If I actually challenge that, will this cause them to not like me anymore or abandon me? So it's a fearful stuff going on there as well. So these masks, I think we are unconsciously addicted to them. It can become a real addiction, just maintaining the status quo. So we've put on this persona for however many years, maybe our whole life or the majority of our life since childhood. And that's how people think we are. That's who people think we are. They come to relate to our mask. And if we want to show them who we truly are, that's quite destabilizing. It's quite scary for us to take off that mask and then show people something different. And also for our friendship groups and our families and our employers and colleagues, they might think, "Whoa, hang on, that's not you. What's going on here?" So it can very often lead to changes in relationships. It can lead to relationships ending. I know many marriages and romantic relationships which have failed as one person has actually got in touch with their true self and shown that, and then the other person has realized, this isn't the person that I thought you were. I don't love this person, or this person is actually quite a challenge to be with, and they end up separating. Likewise with friendships. I know my friendship group has changed massively over the past 10 years, and it's because I was relating to people with my mask on, and I always kind of felt a bit lonely because I was not really with my tribe and I wasn't showing them myself. And I'm in the process of increasingly finding my tribe now, and I've got a lot of people now that I feel comfortable with being my true self with, and I'm trying to broaden that out now as we come out of lockdown and in the UK here, and are allowed to meet up with people again. Yes, so why is this an addiction? Well, if we go back to what an addiction is, according to Gabor Mate, it's any behaviour that a person finds temporary relief or pleasure in and therefore craves, but then they suffer negative consequences from and have trouble giving up. So I think if we apply that to masks, it works. It certainly works for me and a lot of the people I know and the clients that I work with. So I wonder if it resonates with you. Do you feel like you wear a mask? And if so, does it give you some kind of temporary pleasure or relief from pain or deficiency or showing up, or that courage that we need to actually take the mask off? And what are the negative consequences of wearing that mask, of not showing your true self? Does it mean that you don't have meaningful relationships? Does it mean that your romantic relationships break down as they get to see more of who you really are? Does it mean that you're unfulfilled at work or you're not following your path? So yeah, let me know. What does it mean for you? Do you feel like it could be an addiction that you didn't know you had? Yeah, so what mask are you wearing? And are you ready to take yours off? Have you maybe outgrown your mask now, I wonder? What's next? Yeah, so what would it might be useful just to kind of reflect, and if you're into mindfulness and meditation, maybe I'll invite you to close your eyes and just imagine what would life be like if you took your mask off, if indeed you feel that you wear a mask. So what parts of your true self are you not showing at the moment? What are you hiding away? What do you not express? Is it your creativity? Is it your playfulness? Is it around boundaries? Do you let people trample all over you and you're not being congruent and speaking your truth around when people overstep your boundaries? Do you not challenge other people? Do you want to say something to people when they say something that you find offensive or insulting, or they've overstepped a boundary, or they've criticised you in some way which is unfair? Do you not express how you feel if somebody's hurt you? Or even when you're feeling joy, do you actually share that? Do you show it? Are you embracing your passions? Are you doing what you love? Are you really fulfilling your potential through work and your hobbies and how you spend your time? Or is there a part of you which perhaps you're out of touch with? Maybe something that you loved as a child. Maybe a dream that you had that you haven't pursued, and you feel that it's locked away, you've locked it away or given up on it, but it's never too late. So Kim is saying, I struggle with boundaries, I fear rejection, and it holds me back in this part of my life. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Kim. That's a very common phrase, a very common experience. Fear of rejection, yeah, and I think it goes back to that wiring I was talking about earlier on, Kim. It's in us, it's in our DNA, all the way back to early humans, but also if we've had experiences in childhood, as I imagine you know, given the talk I saw you do last week, those traumas, those difficult experiences we may have had as childhood, we might have had abandonment, either from our parents or our loved ones, whether that was physical abandonment or emotional abandonment. We fear that because those are the relationships that form our blueprints of how we relate in the world. So yeah, it's something we can work through. It does take a lot of time, it does take a lot of courage, and it seems to me, Kim, if you don't mind me saying, that you are someone who's doing that work. You know, you're with the training that you're doing and the group you've set up. You seem like someone who's on that path, and I'm very confident that you will get to where you want to be, and just be kind and patient with yourself as you journey down that road. Yes, Marcus, thank you for joining us and for your comment. Interesting topic. Love transpersonal inner work. Yes, me too. Yeah, this is the course that I'm doing is transpersonal psychotherapy, and very much into the transpersonal. So for those that don't know, transpersonal means beyond the person. So seeing not just the person in isolation, but there's something bigger going on, whether that is society or spiritual stuff around God or the collective unconscious or fate or the universe, whatever you want to call it. So it's all linked, and we are all linked. We're all energy, as a friend of mine said to me yesterday. So yes, let's get back on track. So yeah, it's hard. It is hard to remove these masks, and it is a step-by-step process, I think. Baby steps, baby steps. So yeah, embrace your passions. Dance like no one's watching. That's what I did last night. I had an indie disco in my lounge, and I was dancing away, and I got hot. So I closed the curtains and took all of my clothes off and had a naked disco. And that felt very liberating. And I very nearly put it on Facebook, actually, just the silhouette of me against the blinds, but pulled back in the end. Not out of fear, but out of, I always question myself, what's my motive for doing this? Is this to get attention? Is this to get approval? Or might this actually inspire some other people? So I held back and just put a photo of me on there instead. But yeah, doing things like that, dancing like nobody's watching, and expressing, getting in touch with your passion, whether it's dancing or A friend of mine that I played football with on Friday, first football match for nearly 4 years, and I'm still aching, said that he has lost touch with his childlike sense of fun. So that's part of who we are. That's part of our inner child. It's part of our soul. And, we grow up, we're taught that we need to do well at school, get your head down, get some good results, and get yourself a job. And when you're in your job, you need to wear a shirt and a tie, if it's that kind of job, and work really hard, be super serious. And many people and many workplaces don't allow for playfulness. They don't allow for a childlike sense of fun. It's seen as not fitting for the workplace. But for me, this is what I teach on my workplace wellbeing programs, is that it's so important to bring your whole self to work, and that includes humor and fun and levity, and it just creates a lovely atmosphere, gets people connected to each other and connected to themselves. So yeah, there's various things that I work with some companies to help them bring some more joy back into their workplace, get it more person-centered. So yes, it's a courageous act, and as I say, it can rock the boat with families, friends, spouses, all of our relationships, and we risk losing some of those by actually taking this courageous step to be our whole selves. But if we don't do it, then it's a false self that we're projecting out into the world. It can be incredibly exhausting. It can really mean that we're not respecting ourselves, we're not respecting who we are, and the world is missing out on you. The world is missing out on your talents and your uniqueness. We're all unique. We've all got these wonderful talents and wonderful personalities to bring to the world. We don't need to put personas on and just be like everybody else. We don't need to be sheep. We don't need to fit in, although we feel that we need to. So yeah, we can get disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from others. It's a betrayal of our true nature if we live our whole lives with this false self, this mask that we can become addicted to. So the courageous step is to do the work, become vulnerable, be authentic, be congruent, and connect with yourself, connect with others. So yeah, I suppose it's about forgetting what society has taught you. And this, I think, is perhaps why many people, when they reach midlife, start to question, hang on, is this all there is? It used to be called a midlife crisis, but I like to see it as a spiritual awakening. And I think, gosh, I've been spending 20 years of my life working 9 to 5 in an office, doing a job that I don't care about. I'm bored. I'm not bringing myself to work. It's not fulfilling me. I'm not doing any of these things that I'm passionate about. And they start to question it, and things can come tumbling down, and it can be a very tricky time, the dark night of the soul. But that actually can be the beginning of spring, of new roots and new energy coming out, and starting to explore, or not explore really, it's getting back in touch with who we really are, getting back in touch with that young child before all of these masks and behavioural adaptations started to form a crust, really. It's a crust over us and a crust over our heart. So, yes, forget what society's told you. Come home, embrace yourself, your uniqueness and creativity. And in my experience, when we do that, life just flows. Things happen, opportunities arise, relationships develop, we meet new people, we get into new things, and flourishing happens. We thrive. Pathlight Thrive Hive. This is one of the reasons that I've called it Pathlight Thrive Hive, because we can thrive when we are connected in this little hive of bees and being our true selves, including, bringing in all aspects of us, including the shadow. And if you have mental health issues at the moment or anything you're ashamed of, just share it, get it out there. And the more we share, the more we show of our true selves, the more we can become accepted. We do need safe spaces to do this. So hopefully, you find this group one of those places. Another place you could do it is in therapy, or with a trusted friend who is not going to judge you. Peer support groups, stuff like that. Even journaling is really good for getting getting our feelings, our inner thoughts and our passions out there, and working on anything that we're ashamed about or we're hiding away. Yes, so as I say, I've been doing a lot of that myself in the past year. So I know it's not easy. I know it can be really difficult, but I honestly feel that anything that's worth doing is very rarely easy. And the rewards are great. The rewards of doing this work, being courageous, getting in touch with yourself are wonderful and priceless, actually. What else? Yeah, so what else can we do? We can say what's true. We can say what's real. We can live our truth. As I say, overcome shame, embrace the shadow like in the 12-step program, because it is an addiction. We're addicted to these masks, and if you're familiar with the 12-step program or not, maybe look it up and see what the 12 steps are. And I imagine some of those will be really useful in removing these masks and our addiction to these masks. Marcus, I'll come back to your question in a moment. I'll just finish off this little bit here. What else did I want to say? Yes. Yes. So Jack, who I went for a walk with last week, said that not everyone is going to like us. And that's true whether we're wearing a mask or whether we're totally discarding our masks. Not everyone is going to like us. Not everyone is going to accept us. Not everyone is part of our tribe. And that's okay. It's okay. For me, it's about quality and depth of friendship rather than quantity. And not just friendship, relationship, any kind of relationship. For me, the depth and the quality of it is much more important than how many friends we've got, either in real life or on Facebook. So I'd much rather have 5 friends that I know I can turn to at any time, whether I'm in a crisis or just want to get something off my chest or show my true self or dance like nobody's watching, than have 500 Facebook friends who actually don't know me, don't get me, don't accept me, and I don't feel safe sharing with. So quality, not quantity. And yeah, saying your truth. And when we do that, like Jack said, not everyone's going to like us. Some people are going to drift away, and that's okay. And I just want to put a note of caution on this about speaking our truth, because again, there's a lot of this out there. Like the word authenticity, there's a lot of noise about speaking your truth, no matter what. But I think we need to do it in a certain way. We need to do it with kindness and compassion. And something that I'm a big fan of is non-violent communication. And again, this is something that I work with some of my clients, and I try and live by myself. And it's all about connecting heart to heart with compassion. So when there's any kind of conflict in a relationship, we quite often focus on the behaviours, and we will criticise that person for their behaviours. But beneath every behaviour is a need. So if we can focus on the need and bring compassion to that need, mindfulness and compassion, and see what we can do to address those needs. So that's what I mean about speaking your truth with authenticity, just saying, these are what my needs are. And having that received without judgment, without criticism, without feeling that anyone's being blamed, because that doesn't help. That just creates more tension. And yeah, I'm going to do a little quote from Elizabeth Lesser, which I heard on a Tara Brach podcast. So this is me quoting a quote. And she says, "My prayer to God every day is remove the veils so I might see what is really happening here and not be intoxicated by my stories and my fears." I'm going to say that again. Remove the veils so I might see what is really happening here and not be intoxicated by my stories and my fears. And that really speaks to me about the addiction of these masks and the fear behind it, and what Kim was saying earlier on about struggling with boundaries and that sense of rejection potentially. We do fear removing these veils, these masks, because we can become intoxicated or addicted to the stories of, oh, I'm not good enough. I have to behave a certain way, otherwise people won't accept me. And that fear of abandonment, fear of rejection. So I like that quote from Elizabeth Lesser. Okay, I'm going to go back to Marcus's question. Could you talk about identification with thought and how that might relate to the false self, ego/personality? Thank you, Marcus. That's a really good question. I'd like to spend some time thinking about that actually before I respond. So identification with thought and how that may relate to the false self. Ego, yeah. So I think a lot of, that's a really good question. Thank you, Marcus. I think masks are a form of ego. And my understanding of ego in the Jungian definition, there's all sorts of different definitions of ego. So for me, from a transpersonal perspective, we need to develop a healthy ego in order to survive in society. So that's part of the learning process of growing up and, adapting to our caregivers and making sure that we are loved and accepted and we feel safe. So we put these masks on, and when we start our first job and we go into work and we're super serious and a hard worker and all that stuff, and we hide parts of ourselves away, and we might project this ego of competitiveness or success and material wealth, all of the trappings that come with that, in order to show people that we are acceptable and behave in certain ways to show that we are popular. And then very often again in midlife, that can be when the masks start to crumble. And that for me is the ego crumbling. And it's the soul saying, hello, remember me, you've abandoned me, you've forgotten who you really are. And the ego is no longer serving. So this is when we need to really get back in touch with our true spirit or God, our connection with the spiritual side of things. I'm always a bit cautious using the word God, because personally I'm not a religious person, and I know it can trigger people who are not religious. But whatever God means to you, or the fate or universe or spirituality, this wider thing that's outside of us. So feeling that connection to spirit, energy, whatever, is what often comes calling in midlife. And this is where we have the opportunity to examine that ego. And if it has crumbled and we find ourselves in one of those difficult places, dark night of the soul, we might need to build it back up again. So this is quite a lot of the work that happens in depth psychotherapy, is building up that ego again to a healthy level. And then there's the opportunity to transcend the ego, to go beyond that. So that's the transpersonal aspect, where we're using our mind and our heart in service to spirit, in service to the greater good, and following our purpose, which for me, I've found over the past few years, I feel like I've touched upon something of this level, where I feel I have found my purpose, what I'm here for. And prior to that, I'd been wearing many masks and trying on lots of different masks and trying on lots of different careers and relationships and stuff, and they weren't working. And the same thing kept happening. But it wasn't until I was able to build up a healthier ego, a healthier relationship with that aspect of myself, that I've begun to be able to take these masks off and transcend it. And I'm not saying I'm there yet at all. I'm definitely not the finished article. But yeah, that can be part of the process, and it's long and it's hard and it takes a lot of courage, but it's very rewarding work. I just want to see if I've answered your question. Identification with thought, and how that relates to the false self. Yeah, so the ego, I suppose the false self is when we hang on to that ego, we hang on to that mask for fear of it slipping and showing our vulnerability. And the identification with thought, I suppose, if I'm interpreting your question correctly, Marcus, I think that is the thoughts of, the fearful thoughts of, this is what's true, you're not good enough. You have to behave in a certain way in order to be accepted, in order to be liked. So I hope I've answered your question. Do feel free to come back to me, Marcus, if there's more to say on that, or if I've misinterpreted what you were asking there. And oh yes, you've also said what's behind all the masks and personas we wear. Hopefully we've answered that question. So it's probably different for everyone, Marcus, but I think it's the true self. It's the true self. That's what's behind them all. And when, again, if you look into the eyes of a baby or an infant, that you see their true self. And I think this is, you've had a baby yourself recently, Marcus, and I've seen some of the photos of you two together, and it's lovely. And I imagine that when you look into the eyes of your infant there, you have unconditional love, you have a deep connection, and you see a pure soul. And your child will see that in you as well. So that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of connection to true self, which we lose track of in probably 90-something% of our lives, maybe get a glimpse of when we are in the company of somebody like that, pure soul, or someone who's reached enlightenment, or someone who has shed those masks and is just themselves. Like it or lump it, this is me. Okay, Kim, this has been extremely interesting. Thank you, Paul. I need to go now, but we'll watch the end later. Thank you so much. You're very welcome, Kim. I hope you enjoy the rest of it when you come to watch it. What else have I got to say? Yeah, so have I talked about how we remove the mask? Speak your truth, courage and authenticity, and it can be really useful to have a courage and authenticity buddy. So someone who's on the same journey, who's committed to taking off these addictive masks, and you can be bouncing off each other with accountability. So maybe check in with each other once a day, once a week, once a month, whatever you want to do, and just relate without any sense of competitiveness or shame how you're doing, okay? And set targets for each other of, okay, next week I'm going to go into work and I'm going to say to my boss or my colleague what I really feel, or what my needs are that I haven't expressed in the past. Or it might be, I'm going to go to a gig on my own and I'm going to speak to people, even though I don't know them and it's scary and they might reject me, but they won't. Just going out of your comfort zone step by step like that. So a courage and authenticity buddy is a really good tip. I think it is anyway. Surround yourself with people that accept you and won't judge you. So that's, again, what these groups are great for, this Facebook group, hopefully. Therapy, as I've said, is really good. You can explore your childhood, understand those adaptations and coping mechanisms that you put in play as a young child, and that's very normal to do that. Get in touch with the story, the things that happen to you, your traumas. I'm going to turn this light on because light is fading. And yeah, acknowledge what's happened to you. Understand your story with objectivity. Express all of those things, all of that hurt, all of that pain, all of those boundary crosses that have happened in a safe way. And then come to forgiveness and compassion, and then new behaviours start to emerge. So that's the cycle of transformation that I learned on the Hoffman process. So acknowledge, express in a safe way, forgiveness and compassion, and then new behaviours. That's what leads to lasting and meaningful change. Meditation, if you're into that, then loving compassion meditation can be really good for connecting yourself to who you are and forgiving yourself and getting over some of the shame stuff. Mindfulness, practicing that every day. You know, I go outside every day for a walk, a run, or a cycle, and that can be really good for me to get into nature, reflect. It's a spiritual practice for me, so whatever works for you, spiritual practice-wise, can get you closer to your true self. Journaling, as I mentioned earlier on, is really good. I went for a walk with a friend today and recommended that he journal before he goes to bed because he finds his brain ticking over. Not ticking over, going 1,000 miles an hour as soon as he gets in bed. So journaling, get stuff out onto the page, and very often you might find that some of your shadow stuff, some of your persona stuff will come out there. You can reflect on, did I show my true self today? What did I do well? What could I have done better? What other stretch can I do for my behaviour tomorrow or next week? Yeah, so like I say, baby steps. The more you do it, the more confidence you'll get. I imagine this is what I found anyway. So the fear is going to be there whenever you're trying to go out of your comfort zone and change your behaviours. It's going to elicit fear, of course. We don't like change. Change is scary, but if you do it, start with a little thing, and then you might find, oh yeah, actually the world didn't collapse, or that relationship is still going strong, even though I expressed what I really wanted or what I really felt. And yes, those people still like me, even though I danced like nobody was watching. So step by step, try it, and you might find that it is a kind of exponential process where you start small, but then these 1% all add up, and have a look at yourself in a month's time and 6 months' time and see how much you've grown. It's really rewarding to see how much you've grown. And I'm going to finish with another quote. Let's just go back to the comment from Marcus. Thanks for that. There are definitely moments of deep, unconditional connection with my new baby that's beyond my understanding. Great talk. Yeah, thank you, Marcus. And maybe that's the transpersonal, that's the spiritual connection going on there. So yeah, there's probably bits that I've missed here, but if anybody has any thoughts, questions, if you want to share anything of your own experience around your addiction to masks, or if you've just realised, oh my goodness, I do wear masks, oh my goodness, it is an addiction, feel free to share it, and we can have a bit of a dialogue about it. And if there's any questions, I will come back to them and answer them in the group in due course. So I hope you found it useful and interesting. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of this lovely community, which for me has been wonderful, over the past year, of showing my vulnerability and peeling back some of my veils, some of my layers, throwing away some of my masks, and being more vulnerable, more authentic, showing more of my true self, and getting really lovely feedback from people, which has given me a lot of confidence as I step back out into the real world and try and translate my screen confidence to face-to-face confidence. I'm doing it. Okay, not there, not yet though. So I'm going to finish off with a quote from Mark Nepo, who is a poet that I really like. And again, I think this is really fitting. And again, I have pinched this from Tara Brach's podcast, so it's a quote of a quote. Yeah, here we go. It says, "We waste so much energy trying to cover up who we are, when beneath every attitude is the want to be loved. And beneath every anger is a wound to be healed. And beneath every sadness is the fear that there will not be enough time. When we hesitate in being direct, we unknowingly slip something on, some added layer of protection that keeps us from feeling the world. And often that thin covering is the beginning of a loneliness which, if not put down, diminishes our chances of joy. It's like wearing gloves every time we touch something, and then forgetting we chose to put them on. We complain that nothing feels quite real. Our challenge each day is not to get dressed to face the world, but to unglove ourselves so that the doorknob feels cold, and the car handle feels wet, and the kiss goodbye feels like the lips of another being, soft and unrepeatable." There we go, Mark Nepo. I love that. Putting gloves on and then complaining that the world doesn't feel real. Yeah, so I've got tingles now. Tingles all over. Yeah, so I felt that loneliness through much of my life. I felt outside of society. I felt I don't fit in. I felt that I haven't had close relationships with very many people at all, and feel like I haven't been very good at maintaining friendships. And I now know that that is because I haven't shown my true self. So people have not been able to get to know me. I've been touching them with gloves on. I've been speaking to them with masks on. So yeah, unglove, masks off. Let's feel each other, show each other who we really are. It's a beautiful thing. Nice quote, I can relate, says Marcus. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to end there. Like I say, if you have any questions, do pop them in the comments or send me a message and I will come back to you. And once again, thank you for being here. If you're not watching this in the group, then go onto Facebook and search for Pathlight Thrive Hive and feel free to join the group. And if you're interested in any of the services I offer, the group's free. There's nothing payable in there, although you can support me by going to buymeacoffee.com/thrivehive if you'd like to do so. So the group's all free, all the talks and everything are free there, and it's a lovely supportive community. But if you want to do any business with me through pathlight.org.uk, I offer mental health first aid courses to individuals and organisations. I offer coaching to individuals, families and teams, and I offer workplace wellbeing programs to organisations as well. So have a look on the website, and if there's anything that you feel is interesting, I also do webinars and workshops, mustn't forget that, all around relationships, communication and mental health and all sorts of lovely stuff. Have a check on the website, and if there's anything that that tickles your fancy, give me a shout. Email info@pathlight.org.uk, or you can contact me on Facebook as well. Okay, thank you folks. See you soon and take good care of yourselves. Bye-bye.